When I was around the age of 7 to 9, every couple of nights I would feel like I would have woken up. I wasn't sure if I did or not, to be completely honest. And I would look at my door, and there would be a tall lanky figure with torn clothing and holes in a trench coat that it wore, and it would just stand there, looking into my soul as if I was being judged for something. The last few times I ever had this dream were the last days I spent at the previous house I lived at, and the figure's eyes started to glow yellow, and it really scared me. Forgot to mention the fact that I had sleep paralysis, which amplified the fear factor. I was in my friend's house for a sleepover, and we hear the bathroom door slam, but it's only us, so we go to check it out and see that it's still open. We go back to bed and she wakes me up again saying there is another noise. It sounded like loud footsteps. We lock her door and start to arm ourselves to fight with a bat and knife, but as we are getting cover behind her dresser, the door bends in towards us, and we hear a loud slam. We think someone's trying to break in, so we get up ready to kick some meeseeks, but then we hear the footsteps again, but they become quiet. We go to investigate and find nothing, so we go to sleep, and she tells me in the morning she played with an Ouija board a few days ago. Never slept over again, but we did date for about 3 months. I had a porcelain doll. I got it from my mom on my 11th birthday. There was nothing wrong with her for years. I married and moved with my husband. We bought a house, nothing creepy, normal, regular house, nothing paranormal. My mother once visited us and brought with her this doll. She said it was mine and thought I might want it. I put her on a table in front of a window. Since that day, I began to notice the window roller shutter was always closed. Only on this one particular window. I remember opening shutter and then after some time. Next morning, or after we got back home from work shopping. It was always closed. Back then, I lived only with my husband, and it was definitely not him closing those shutters. The shutter definitely wasn't broken. We checked it. One night we were sitting on a couch and watching TV, and then suddenly this roller shutter just closed by itself. My husband came and opened it. After few seconds it closed again, so fast it slammed on the window glass. We were scared, but I made the decision in a minute. I took the doll in my car and drove her to the next city and throw her in the dumpster. Why other city? I had this strange feeling that if I just throw her away too close to our house, I might find her back in front of our door. Maybe I watched too many horror movies, but at that time I felt I was doing okay. Since then we never had any problems with those shutters again. Everything stopped. Thankfully the doll never came back. But we both believe it was her. I've told this one before. My childhood home where I lived with my 2 brothers and my parents before they divorced. There was a room that was initially my older brother's room and later became my younger brother's room. Older brother used to casually mention that he would wake up at night sometimes and see a shadow figure of a man with a top hat standing at the foot of his bed, watching him. Not in a threatening way, just watching over him. He only mentioned it a couple times, and only to my dad and I. He's a pathological liar, so we always ignored it. Well, a couple years later, when that room became my younger brother's room, he eventually mentioned to us the same thing. Shadow figure with a top hat. Non-threatening. Watching over him. My younger brother is mentally handicapped. Very. He couldn't make this sort of thing up, and he was never around when my older brother had told us about the man before. At that point, we believed. None of the rest of us ever saw him, and we've since moved. Hopefully he's watching over whoever sleeps in that room now. I got a few from the house I grew up in. The house was old. It had 1974 done in by someone's finger in the driveway concrete. It had to be early 2000s because the computer I was sitting at was an old CRT. I was at the computer, which was situated across from the stairs in the basement. I can't remember what I was doing on the computer at the time, but suddenly the monitor, and only the monitor, shut itself off. I was just getting up from the chair to see what was up when a face suddenly appeared in front of mine for a second. I could see the face, I remember what it looked like, but I could see through it. When the face disappeared, my entire body felt like it weighed 10 times as much as it did, and I fell to the floor. It was almost like sleep paralysis but being wide awake. I crawled as best I could up the stairs and into the living room where my mum and stepdad were. Mum wrote it off as a seizure, which I was known to have when I was very young due to encephalitis, but nothing explains the monitor shutting itself off or the face I saw. Same sort of time frame, computer was set up the exact same way, only this time, I had a friend with me. We were really into Warcraft 2 and StarCraft at the time, so we were taking turns playing that on the computer when the power went out. which wasn't an odd occurrence for summer in small-town Saskatchewan, but we got up to go hang out upstairs. When I got to the bottom of the stairs, I noticed the light in the porch was still on. Upstairs still had power. I turned around to my friend when the power in the basement came back on, and we heard a laugh travel from one end of the basement to the other like a gust of wind. This wasn't like we heard it come from upstairs by accident. We were both at the bottom of the stairs, and the stairs were enclosed with drywall. To the right of the stairs was the laundry room where the power box was, so there is no way my stepdad, who loved to play pranks on people and scare them, could have gotten past either myself or him. We thought at first it must have been him, but there was no one in the laundry room. There's no possible way he could have sneaked past us, and when we got upstairs to tell my mum and stepdad, they were both in the living room watching TV and had not heard this awful laugh that we did. It gives me chills just thinking about it. This is when my room was still upstairs. In my teens, I moved down to the basement because I got sick of hearing them go at it at night, both fighting and stuff. Anyway, I'm laying in bed, about to fall asleep, when I can feel something odd. You know when you can feel someone watching you? Like that, only it felt like a physical shape at the end of my bed. This was a solid framed bed too. It used to be a water bed, so this frame was heavy and had no access to underneath. I lay there for a while trying to understand what it was that I was feeling. I was probably between the ages of 10 to 12, and the house always had something odd going on that rarely anyone but I experienced, and this particular occasion was the first time anything physically happened. I didn't know what was going on. I could feel something in the room with me, and I'm not opening my eyes because I'm too scared to when my bed shifts to the right like someone had kicked the bottom left corner. I didn't sleep in the room that night, and no one believed me, but I remember checking the floor because there was carpet, and the indent from the bed frame was visible. Me and two other buddies of mine frequently had fires during the summer after we graduated high school, in the top middle part of this old farmer field enclosed by trees, except for an entrance and exit, on either side of the field, onto a long quad trail running parallel to the field. There was this 10-foot patch of dirt where we used to set the fire up and put blankets down where we'd chill out, smoke Calaxian, and drink till the AM, then walk home. As we didn't live particularly far away. This particular night, one of my buddies gets loaded and goes for a piss. We'll call him Vic. About 5 minutes go by and we hear Vic yelling out to come over and try and find him. I talked to him after and he was just sitting in the middle of the trees away from the fire because he was too drunk to stand. Dan wanted to flee with us. So me and, we'll call my other friend Dan, went towards his voice, where there was a smaller path in the corner of the field where we usually went to gather firewood. So we walk up the trail with flashlights and up towards where we got the wood and start looking around in the trees. Dan suddenly sees something off on the right side of the trail and starts stumbling into the trees and stops about 15 feet from where I'm standing, still on the trail. Dan barks out, saying along the lines of, "I found you, you drunk plumbus, get up and let's get back to the fire, this stuff is stupid." I shined my light at where Dan had his pointed and it looked like someone crouched down in a black hoodie. Hood up and looked like Vic's hoodie, knelt down under some trees. That's when I heard, from about 30 feet behind me, I hear Vic call out, "Haha you butter robot, you suck at this game," and we froze. I turned back around to look at Dan, and the terror on his face I'll never forget. We're all fleabing loaded here by the way. But we turned back to whatever was there, and it was still there. Clear as day. Not moving an inch. Dan shone his light at me and screamed, "Op, run." As soon as I heard that, I fleabing hauled my butt down this path. Didn't turn around once until I made it back to the fire. I didn't notice how fast I was running till it took a solid minute for my friend to come sprinting back to the fire, visibly shook. After this, we shouted out to our drunk friend to get the fleab out of the woods or we're leaving him behind. Got him out real quick, told him what we saw, and packed our stuff immediately, went the fleab home. Deep in the woods, where 100% no way it was a homeless person, nor could it have been us just imagining something. Dan was a few feet away from the thing and said it looked like Vic, but much thinner and sitting in the fetal position. Still couldn't ever explain it, and I still haven't gotten Dan to go camping again. My then girlfriend had moved into her first home, away from parents, and always had a knack for seeing and feeling things to which I was always dismissive. We would be going down the highway and she would ask if I saw that man on the road out the window I was just looking at. I did not. This happened all the time with her. She claimed a little girl entity would appear to her at her parents'. I was still skeptical. She mentioned odd feelings and occurrences while moving in and unboxing while alone. Still, I didn't buy it. She asks me to stay over in the first week as she didn't want to be alone in this old Victorian-style home that has been modified for 4 different tenants. The place was odd in some ways, very low ceilings, extremely quiet while being very close to the highway, not to mention her experiences. I brought my Xbox over in anticipation that I would stay up much later than her. After playing into the early hours of the morning, I decided to turn in for the night, but was not tired just yet. I let myself outside and smoked a bowl and then go to lie down. Eyes are getting heavy but still a bit restless. Remember the house conversion? Her bedroom was what I guess used to be a study in the former home. It had no door, just a white entrance to my left while in bed. I looked toward the entryway, and I can see what appeared to be a transparent silhouette of a female figure with a shape that suggested long tight curly hair and a dress with shoulder bells. Perhaps something from the 90s. The figure was partially standing out from the entryway, so I could only see less than half the face and shoulder and arm. Startled, I turn away with my back towards it for a few moments as I count to 60. I look back, and it is now more exposed, but not fully standing in the entryway. I turn away again, look back again, it is now standing almost in full view. I noticed at this time a gentle sway from left to right in its stance. I spoke out loud, "I'm going to sleep now, don't wake me up floating over me or anything," then went to sleep. I awoke the next morning to the sound of breakfast being made and went to the kitchen to say good morning to my then GF. I told her I think I met a roommate last night before bed, and she asked for me to explain. I told her all about it, and she was fascinated and then told me more stories of things that had happened in the home while she was there alone. Several months later, she learned that 2 former tenants were heroin users and the boyfriend had shot up his GF where she fatally odded in the home. I believe that was who paid me a late night visit. I now believe a bit more in the unexplained.